The night train swayed gently as I settled into my seat, the soft hum of the wheels against the tracks creating a rhythmic backdrop to my thoughts. The cabin was dimly lit, with only a few reading lights dotting the darkness like stars in an indoor sky. Most passengers were already drifting off to sleep, heads lolled against windows that reflected the occasional passing light from small towns we'd never stop at. I wasn't planning to sleep, though. This journey was my escape, a temporary reprieve from the life I'd left behind that morning. A breakup that had left me questioning everything I thought I knew about myself, about love, about connection. I'd always struggled with insecurity, with the feeling that I was somehow different, that the connections others formed so easily were somehow beyond my reach. Growing up, I'd watched friends fall in and out of love with an ease I envied, while I remained cautious, guarded, afraid of what might happen if I truly let someone see all of me. The breakup had only confirmed my fears, that I was too much, too intense, too different to be loved completely. So here I was, on a night train to nowhere in particular, just needing to be in motion when everything else in my life felt stagnant. I expected the journey to be uneventful, just me, my thoughts, and the darkness outside the window. What I didn't expect was him. He boarded at a small station about an hour into the journey. The doors hissed open, letting in a gust of cold night air that seemed to wake the sleeping car momentarily before settling back into its drowsy rhythm. And there he was, silhouetted against the station lights, searching for his seat. I found myself hoping, with an intensity that surprised me, that it wouldn't be near mine. I wasn't in the mood for conversation, for the awkward dance of acknowledging a stranger's presence while maintaining the polite distance that train etiquette demanded. But of course, the universe has a sense of humor. He checked his ticket, looked up at the seat numbers, and then his eyes met mine. A small smile, apologetic, as if he knew he was intruding on my solitude. "I think I'm next to you," he said, his voice soft enough not to disturb the other passengers, but clear enough to send an unexpected shiver down my spine. I nodded, shifted my bag from the seat beside me, and tried to press myself closer to the window, creating as much space as possible in the confined seats. He settled in beside me, and I couldn't help but notice things about him. The careful way he arranged his bag under the seat, the faint scent of something woodsy and warm, the way his hands looked strong but gentle as he pulled out a book. He was handsome, in an understated way that didn't announce itself but rather revealed itself slowly. In the curve of his jaw, the thoughtfulness in his eyes, the slight curl at the ends of his hair that suggested it might be unruly if grown longer. We sat in silence for a while, the kind that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. I pretended to be absorbed in the darkness outside, watching our reflections in the window, me, small and tense against the glass. Him, relaxed but respectful of the invisible boundary between us. Eventually, he spoke again. "Long journey ahead?" he asked, and there was something in his tone that didn't feel like mere politeness, but genuine interest. "About 6 hours," I replied, surprised at my own willingness to engage. "You?" "The same," he said with a small smile. "Heading home or away from it?" It was such a simple question, but it hit me with unexpected force. Home. Was I heading towards something or running away? "I'm not sure," I admitted, and immediately wondered why I'd been so honest with a stranger. He nodded as if this made perfect sense. Sometimes the journey is the point, not the destination. And just like that, we were talking. Small talk at first, the weather, the lateness of the train, the book he was reading, a novel I'd loved years ago. But there was an ease to our conversation that made the usual barriers seem unnecessary. His name was Elliot, he told me. He was returning from a conference, something about sustainable architecture that he explained with a passion that made even building materials sound fascinating. I found myself telling him about my job in publishing, about the manuscript I'd been editing before the breakup had derailed my concentration. The train rocked us gently as we talked, the rhythm of the tracks punctuating our conversation like a metronome. Other passengers slept around us, creating the strange intimacy that comes from being awake while others dream. Our voices stayed low, creating a bubble of conversation that felt separate from the world outside our shared armrest. That armrest, the rigid barrier between us that somehow made our growing connection feel safe. I could talk to him, laugh with him, even feel the unexpected flutter in my chest when he smiled. because that armrest maintained the proper distance between strangers on a train. As the hours passed, our conversation deepened. We moved from work to dreams, from surface-level observations to the kind of thoughts usually reserved for late-night talks with old friends. He told me about growing up in a small coastal town, about the freedom and limitation of a place where everyone knew your name. I shared stories of my city childhood, of finding solitude in crowded places. We discovered shared tastes in music, disagreed pleasantly about films, found common ground in the books that had shaped us. "It's strange," he said after a particularly long exchange about our favorite authors, "how you can feel like you know someone after just a few hours of conversation." "Do you feel like you know me?" I asked, and held my breath waiting for his answer. He considered this, his eyes thoughtful in the dim light. "Not entirely, but I feel like I'm getting glimpses of you, like watching someone through a window as they move from room to room. Each time I see something new, something real." The honesty of his answer made my heart beat faster. I wasn't used to being seen, not really. In my past relationships, I'd always held parts of myself back, afraid of rejection. But here, with this stranger on a night train, I found myself wanting to be visible, to step fully into the light of his attention. The train swayed around a curve, and our shoulders brushed briefly. Even through layers of clothing, the contact sent warmth spreading through me. I shifted slightly, creating distance again, but the moment lingered between us like a question neither of us was ready to ask. As the night deepened, so did our conversation. We talked about heartbreak, his from a relationship that had ended 2 years ago, mine still fresh and raw. We talked about family expectations and personal disappointments, about the gap between who we thought we'd be and who we'd become. There was something freeing about confessing fears to someone who had no connection to my daily life, no preconceptions about who I was or should be. "I've always struggled with feeling different," I admitted during a lull in our conversation. "Like there's something about me that doesn't quite fit with what people expect." He was quiet for a moment, and I worried I'd said too much, revealed too much of the insecurity that I usually kept hidden. But then he spoke, his voice gentle in the darkness. "Different isn't wrong," he said. "It's just unexpected. And unexpected things can be the most beautiful." The train entered a tunnel, and for a moment, the windows turned into perfect mirrors, reflecting our faces clearly against the darkness. Our eyes met in the glass, and something shifted between us, a recognition that went beyond the words we'd been exchanging. It was after that moment that he lifted the armrest. It was such a simple action, a mechanical click, the barrier between us disappearing into the back of the seats. But it felt monumental, this removal of the physical boundary that had made our growing intimacy safe. Without it, the space between us became charged with possibility. "Is this okay?" he asked, and I knew he wasn't just talking about the armrest. I nodded, not trusting my voice. The train swayed again, and this time when our shoulders touched, there was nothing to prevent the contact from continuing. We sat side by side, the warmth of his arm against mine becoming the most important sensation in my world. We continued talking, but now there was a new awareness between us, a consciousness of each other as more than just conversational partners. I found myself noticing the way his hands moved when he spoke, the curve of his smile, the exact shade of his eyes in the dim light. And I could feel his attention on me in return, attentive and appreciative in a way that made me feel both vulnerable and strangely powerful. As the night progressed, our conversation occasionally lapsed into comfortable silences. During one of these, he gently took my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine as if it were the most natural thing in the world. My heart raced, but I didn't pull away. Instead, I tightened my grip slightly, an acknowledgement of whatever was happening between us. "I didn't expect this," he said softly, his thumb tracing patterns on the back of my hand. "When I got on this train, I was just thinking about getting home, getting some sleep. I wasn't looking for connection." "Neither was I admitted. "I was running away, I think. From feelings, from facing what went wrong in my relationship. And now," I looked at our joined hands, at this unexpected intimacy with a stranger who somehow didn't feel strange at all. "Now I'm here, fully here, in this moment." The train began to slow unexpectedly, the change in rhythm breaking the spell between us momentarily. An announcement crackled over the speakers. There was a technical issue. We'd be stopped for approximately 30 minutes. Around us, sleeping passengers stirred, grumbled, and then settled back into sleep. But for us, this pause in our journey created a new kind of tension. "Would you like to stretch your legs?" he asked. "There's a viewing platform at the end of the car." I nodded, and we made our way carefully through the darkened car, past the sleeping forms of other travelers. The viewing platform was small, just a section at the end of the train with larger windows and a few seats. It was empty except for us, the rest of the passengers preferring to stay in their seats during the unexpected delay. Outside, the night was clear and cold, stars visible through the large windows. The train had stopped in the middle of nowhere, no station or town lights visible, just darkness and distant pinpricks of starlight. It felt like we were suspended in space and time, removed from the normal world and its rules. "It's beautiful," I said, looking at the stars. "You don't see them like this in the city." "No," he agreed, but when I turned to look at him, he wasn't looking at the stars. He was looking at me, with an intensity that made my breath catch. "You don't." The moment stretched between us, taut with possibility. I had known this man for hours, not days or weeks or years, but somehow it didn't matter. There was a recognition between us that transcended time, a sense that we had found something rare and precious in the unlikeliest of places. He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted to, and touched my face. His fingers were warm against my cheek, and I leaned into the touch without thinking. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. In answer, I closed the distance between us. His lips were soft against mine, the kiss gentle at first, a question rather than a demand. But as I responded, it deepened, becoming something more urgent, more honest. His arms encircled me, pulling me closer, and I wound my fingers into his hair, anchoring myself to him as the world seemed to spin around us. When we finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. "I don't usually do this," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Kiss strangers on trains?" I asked, smiling back. "Feel like this about someone I've just met." The train lurched slightly, the lights flickering as the engines came back to life. Our delay was ending. The journey would continue. But something had changed irrevocably. As we made our way back to our seats, his hand in mine felt like both an anchor and a lifeline. We spent the remaining hours of the journey in a new kind of intimacy. He put his arm around me, and I leaned against his shoulder, talking softly about everything and nothing. We exchanged phone numbers, addresses, made tentative plans for when the train journey ended. But there was also an unspoken acknowledgement that what we had found might be as ephemeral as our time on the train, beautiful because of its unexpectedness, precious because of its brevity. As dawn began to lighten the sky, painting the landscape outside in soft grays and pinks, I felt a bittersweet ache growing in my chest. Our journey was coming to an end. Soon we would arrive at the station, step off the train, and enter back into our separate lives. Would what we had found survive in the harsh light of day, or was it something that could only exist in the liminality of a night train, in the intimate darkness between departure and arrival? The train began to slow as we approached the station. Around us, passengers were waking, gathering their belongings, preparing to continue their journeys elsewhere. Elliot's arm tightened around me slightly. "What are you thinking?" he asked, his voice close to my ear. "I'm thinking that I don't want this to end," I admitted. "But I'm also afraid that it has to. That what happened between us only makes sense here, on this train." He was quiet for a moment, considering. "Maybe," he said finally. "Or maybe it's just the beginning. Maybe we needed the train to find each other, but we don't need it to stay found." The train pulled into the station with a final sigh of brakes. Around us, people were standing, retrieving luggage, moving toward the exits. But we remained seated for a moment longer, reluctant to break the spell of the night. "I have to change trains here," he said, regret coloring his voice. "My connection leaves in 20 minutes. I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. "I'm staying in the city for a few days before heading back." He took my face in his hands, his eyes serious. "This doesn't have to be goodbye. Not if you don't want it to be." "I don't," I said, surprising myself with my certainty. "I really don't." His smile was like the sunrise outside, full of promise and new beginnings. "Then it's not goodbye. It's just, see you soon." We gathered our things and moved with the crowd toward the exits. On the platform, surrounded by the bustle of the station, we shared one last kiss, heedless of the people flowing around us. Then he was walking backward, still looking at me, still smiling. "I'll call you tonight," he promised. "And next weekend, I'll come to you." I watched him until he disappeared into the crowd, feeling strangely light despite the lack of sleep. As I made my way out of the station into the morning light, I realized something had shifted within me. The insecurity that had been my constant companion for so long felt distant, less powerful. In its place was something new, not certainty exactly, but possibility. The possibility that connection didn't have to be feared, that being seen, truly seen, could be a gift rather than a threat. I didn't know what would happen with Elliot. Whether our night train romance would blossom into something lasting or remain a beautiful memory, a moment when two people found each other in the darkness and chose to lift the armrest between them. But I knew that I had changed, that something had opened in me that couldn't be closed again. As I hailed a taxi to my hotel, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from him, sent the moment he'd boarded his connecting train. Just a few words, but they made me smile, made the tiredness of the sleepless night fade away. The journey continues. And this time, no armrests between us. I looked up at the morning sky, at the city waking around me, and felt a surge of gratitude for night trains and chance meetings, for the courage to be vulnerable and the joy of being understood. Whatever happened next, I would carry this night with me. The night a stranger lifted an armrest and, in doing so, helped me open my heart. Total _char_count, 17,683.